You were married June 3rd, 1967, in the middle of the civil rights movement. Did you ever think about that or feel connected to it, Mom?
You know, I think when I met Jim, I didn't think about that, to tell you the truth.
Love conquers all.
I never gave that any thought at all. I didn't think of really as Jim as being white and I'm black. It just seemed natural for us. And I don't think I ever gave that any real thought of what could happen to us. The only time I ever thought or felt concerned was many years after we were married and we were traveling with you. We were taking you to visit his parents in Washington State, and we decided that we were going to camp along the way. And we came to one campsite, and when we drove in, we were told there was only one space left. And when Jim parked the car, I saw a Mississippi license plate. And I felt kind of strange, and I thought, it was a Mississippi license plate. So we parked the car, and when we got to our campsite, a young man came to us, and he had a deep Southern accent, and he said, "May I help you put up your tent?" It was beginning to get dark. And he told me that I could go over and sit with his wife, and that they had a little baby, and he said, "We have corn. We cooked some corn on the cob," and he mentioned something else, and he said, you don't have to bother to make a campfire, you can eat with us." And so I went over and I sat with his wife and we talked, and he was the man and the family from Mississippi. And they were the kindest people, and it just made me realize that you just can't feel because a person is from Mississippi, you can't have any stereotypes about the person.
Wow, that brought a tear to my eye. That's really beautiful.
They were the nicest
so true.
couple.
It's so true. You really can't group whole people from really any group together and say that they're all the same. So it's so beautiful that you all were open to even those conversations, so that you're able to get the exposure and realize, wow, there's good people from the South in every state. And I'm so happy that they were so kind and that you had that experience. Dad, what about you? Did you ever feel as a young man like, will I be able to protect my wife? Will people stare at us? Did you ever think about that?
Yeah, I wasn't concerned to any extent when we were living in Washington, D.C. in that area. I was more concerned later when we took a vacation in 40 states. And I was reluctant to expose my wife and family to the deep South, where we might encounter people who had lacked education or had bad examples around them, and who might do something violent without even thinking. But ultimately, if we had been exposed to it, we would be, I'm certain, willing to give up our life for making a difference that would bring about increasing unity and justice for blacks in all races.
That's so beautiful. I'm so happy that you all met and found each other. It really seems like you're meant to be, and I love your love at first sight story, and just the way you lived your lives was truly such an example for Danielle and I. And I think the exposure that you gave us to truly people from all different backgrounds, all different shades, all different countries, we were so lucky to have that growing up in Gaithersburg, Maryland, and the Washington, D.C., Maryland, Virginia area at the time we were, being a kid, I guess, of the 70s and 80s. I want to say 90s, but anyways, yes. But we had that exposure, and it was so great because I feel like we didn't grow up with some of the baggage that even friends. Honestly, I can think of a friend that grew up in the South, and she shares she grew up in the Deep South, and she didn't really have the exposure to as much diversity, and so some of the stereotypes she grew up with, and then she moved up to Maryland and was able to get additional exposure, and of course we became best friends, and then she got exposure to our family and some of the things that she might have been afraid of before, maybe with people that were different shades, she then wasn't, because she realized that all people are one. We really are one human family, and it was a progression, but she got to that point, and she always would say, like, I'm so happy I became such good friends with your family so that I was able to just increase the amount of people that I became friends with and got exposure to, and I know that I feel so lucky to have that. So thank you for just all the choices that you made. Very grateful.